How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. I'm Sam Holcman, and the topic today, in my opinion, could be a turning point in the madness of who owns your data. Let me repeat that. Who owns your data? Sounds, I know, kind of silly, but let's take that phrase a little bit further. Who owns the stuff that artificial intelligence is using, Google's using, Bing is using, et cetera, et cetera? Well, I think you know the answer. It's the person that developed this. It's the copyright owner. It's whoever owns the intellectual property. And today, almost simultaneously, two different articles and discussions and also lawsuits and statements were made that are kind of fascinating I want to bring to your attention. One of them is Google saying to the Canadian government, especially Prime Minister Trudeau, hey, you know what? We're not going to search any Canadian linked news articles that go back to the source of newspapers or broadcasters or things like that, because your new media law requires us to pay those people to use that. Here's what I said. Hooray. At the same time, OpenAI has been sued for using, as it's called, stolen data, violating our privacy rights with ChatGPT. Once again, what are we talking about here? Who owns the stuff? So for a long time, there seems to have been this loose area of understanding that we have two things going on. In the good old days, technology, information technology used to be called data processing. You know what we're doing now? Processing data. So as I've done in my previous broadcasts, what I'm trying to get people to recognize, and organizations like Google and Facebook and OpenAI and ChatGPT and Microsoft, is it's that there's two parts that we have to look at. The engine, in other words, the processing engine, and these companies have done a marvelous job in developing these things. I love them. They're fantastic. The other side of the coin is the stuff that they're processing, some of which they own and some of which they don't. And the stuff that they don't own for too long has been an issue that no one really wants to face. And I think these two articles are now bringing this to light here. There has to be some equity going on here. And in my previous broadcasts, I discussed what Taylor Swift did when Apple launched the Apple Music service, and how she was able to, I'll use the phrase, discuss this with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. And to Apple's credit, they said, you know what, you're right. There is a difference between the pipe, the process. The pipe supplier is really what Apple is, or the other music services, and what's going through the pipe. Well, we have to recognize nowadays, it's kind of a very simple question that we need to think about, and here's the answer. What is the fuel today? That's the question. The fuel today that will power most of what you and I are talking about is data. And just like you pay for fuel in your automobile or whatever transportation source that you have there, data is the fuel in the internet and knowledge age, and we're going to have to recognize the people that have created that deserve some form of compensation. So things are going to change here. I believe that Google and Facebook and Microsoft and the ChatGPT, OpenAI people understand this. is just figuring out what this balance is. So right now there's this posturing going on, I think, but pretty soon we're going to realize there is a fairness that needs to be there. Also, for those of you that are looking at this, please recognize, and something that I've also discussed in my previous broadcasts, that what we all need to look at is, especially from an enterprise perspective, is what I call EAI, Enterprise Artificial Intelligence, meaning we take the engine that's there, we buy that from whoever the engine supplier is that we're interested in, and the artificial intelligence data that we use is our best practices, proprietary intellectual property in our company, and we use that engine to help ourselves, our own organization, and that's why we call it EAI. No one publishes their best practices on the internet. We know that. The internet does not have best practices. It has published practices. So let's now take that engine that has been pretty well defined even early on here and use that for our competitive advantage. So the day of balance seems to be coming. And all I want to say at this point is hooray. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay healthy and stay well. And take a listen to this concept here and see how you can actually leverage it rather than being a bit concerned about some of the rhetoric that's going on today.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.